Welcome to another history venture. Today, we will be getting hands-on with history and do a deep dive into one of the most famous outdoor concert venues in the world, the awe-inspiring Red Rocks Amphitheater. There's a lot more than just building some seats and a large stage between two rocks. So we will go over how the ancestral Rockies, dinosaurs, and the Great Depression all link it together into creating this magnificent amphitheater. So let's dive on in to the story. To understand the true scale and beauty of this place, we need to take a bit of a step back. When the current Rocky Mountains would have just been a fairy tale, we need to go back 300 million years to see how all of this sandstone had formed into what it is today. When this area was just a series of quiet inland seas, unknowingly developing the building blocks of the amazing redstone features surrounding us today. We need to kind of ask where it all came from. And the answer is the Rocky Mountains, but not the ones we know of today standing behind us, climbing to peaks of 14,000 feet. It was another range called the Ancestral Rockies. So before we dive into the geography of this area, we need to first go over a little bit of vocabulary so I'm not confusing you right off the bat. Okay, I just want to go over one or two terminology items and definitions to make sure we are on the same page before we dive into the weeds of this place. First, I want to quickly show you this chart so you know what is meant when we are talking about time. Geologic time is broken down into categories, just like you would with measurements, so we can compare it to that. So let's break down a yard. Time is broken down by eon, era, period, epoch, and age. Eons span multiple hundreds of millions of years and make up a few eras, which in this case would be each foot in a yard. Eras span a few periods of time, which is a couple 100 million years. That can represent inches within that foot. Periods last tens of millions of years, which is about how long a layer of new rock is needed to be created, which will be represented by half-inch markers in time. Next is epoch, which is every couple million years and the smallest geological unit of time represented by the quarter-inch lines. But there would be one final layer called an age. These are just long-term events like an ice age that may occur and could be represented by the 16th or 8th inch line. So today we will be set in three eras: the Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic, which is our current era. Okay, that really should be all we need. So let's jump into today's history video. During much of the Paleozoic era, which spanned roughly between 543 million years ago and to go about to 248 million years ago, this very area was covered in shallow, small inland seas, slowly building up layer and layer of sand, organic matter, and other particulates at first to form the sandstone surrounding us right now. This layer is called the Fountain Formation and is easily identified along the front range of the Rockies due to its red color caused by exposing iron within the stone, oxidizing it, giving the red rocks the red hue. Just to warn you, there is another layer after the Fountain Formation named the Lions Formation. That is from about 250 million years ago that was also exposed to the same iron-rich water as it and the Fountain Formation were compressing. The key difference between the two is their composition of material. Lions is predominantly made of sand dunes from a desert climate that engulfed this region while it was a part of Pangaea during the Triassic period, which is the first period of the Mesozoic era that follows the Paleozoic era. This is where that vocab lesson we just went over is really starting to kick in. This gives the Lions Formation a very consistent texture and look, allowing it to be useful building material you can find all along the Front Range of Colorado. The blocks found on buildings in Boulder and right here, that like most of the red blocks that this amphitheater is built out of are from that Lions Formation. So showcasing these bricks right behind us, these are from that formation. So these bricks are 250 million years old. Compared to the much more diversified material within the Fountain Formation. Okay, so now let's backtrack again to the Fountain Formation. Before the great mountains surrounding us, and even behind us right here, even began their formation, or the Great Desert had taken over these lands, a much smaller Rocky Mountain range had formed in this area due to an uplift event while the Great Pangean landmass was slowly forming about 300 million years ago. This was a time when all of the major landmasses on the planet would link together into one single massive supercontinent. This would help push this ground below our feet out of those low-lying seas up towards the sky, just like Mount Morrison right behind us. The Ancestral Rockies is what this small range would be named, and they didn't really have a long geologic shelf life. Their uplift was swift, only gaining about 2,000 feet of prominence from the ocean, mainly due to them having been exposed to really heavy weathering in a wet and humid climate on top of consisting and easily eroded material, since much of the uplifted crust was fairly weak. They were more similar in size into today's Appalachian Mountains, or even the ridgeline behind us here of Dakota Ridge. The weathered material was quickly carried away, depositing throughout the area, consisting of clay, sediment, and organic material, with much of this occurring during the Pennsylvanian period, the final period within the Paleozoic era. With the unpredictability of the rapid erosion of the Ancestral Rockies, the fountain layer has a wider range and size of deposited material, different from the lines layer, which is more consistent and uniform. So next time you're here, take a closer look and see if the individual pieces that built this bedrock hundreds of millions of years ago has different particles in it. And here, let's just take a quick closer look. So as we take a closer look, you can really start picking apart all the individual layers deposited over time into this large hunk of sandstone. So some of these layers could have been like a major flood or other kind of major natural phenomenon. And if you look right up top here, you can see this kind of larger piece of deposited quartz. And you can find this throughout all of this sandstone here for the fountain layer, with, like I said before, much of this coming from the Ancestral Rockies about 300 million years ago. This brings us to the end of the Paleozoic era, and we now enter the Mesozoic era. All we need to know really about this point in time is that Pangaea had formed and the lines formation was currently collecting material while this area was part of a large desert. This would change when Pangaea begins to split about 200 million years ago, marking the start of the Jurassic period, slowly turning Colorado into a large, low-lying basin as it kind of slowly sinks back down to sea level, slowly accumulating moisture and leaving that desert climate, eventually becoming an almost Amazonian rainforest scattered and dotted with lakes, swamps, and rivers. This would form the Morrison Formation, which is one of the most dinosaur fossil-rich formations on the planet. And yes, if you're asking, it is named after Morrison, Colorado, which we dive a little bit deeper in with the Gold Rush and Bone Wars video I've put up previously. Bringing us to the final period in the Mesozoic era, Cretaceous. By about 145 million years ago, the land had once again become part of a shallow, lush sea that split the continent almost in half, forming the Dakota Formation, which is what this ridge behind us is made from, named Dakota Ridge. The soft mud and sandy bottom became a perfect catalyst for preserving all of the animals' footprints at the time. And as you can see right behind us is one of the best examples of this. This huge wall is just scattered with tons of footprints from 140 million years ago. Now, how cool is that? That is just so cool. And just so you know, you can come and visit this whenever you want. This is Dakota Ridge, or also known as Dinosaur Ridge. It is right outside of Denver, and it's a really easy walk to get up here. You pretty much have a road to get up. And they even have buses that go through if you want to do a guided paid tour. As the North American plate slowly moved its way from current day Europe, it was run into some smaller oceanic plates on the western side, beginning the process of creating the Rocky Mountains, which is essential to why we have red rocks as we know them today. So let's go see why. So roughly 80 to 75 million years ago, the Rocky Mountains would begin to form during the Laramide orogeny, don't know how to pronounce that, mountain building event between the Cretaceous and Paleogene periods, spanning the gap between the Mesozoic era and entering into the current era we are in, the Cenozoic. A small, dense Pacific plate called the Farallon Plate would make contact with the much larger North American plate. Now, if you look at a map, you'll notice most of the time mountains will form much closer to the fault lines between the plates, but the Rockies are kind of weird because they formed a few hundred miles from the plate boundary. So let's take a look as to why this happened and how that pushed the creation of this unique geographic area hidden along the Front Range of Colorado, which is what red rocks are directly a part of. And I have a simple demonstration with some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches on just kind of how this happened. So right here we have our baseline. So this is going to be the lowest point of our plate. Some of the densest material is located. So over time, material is collected, whether that's through volcanic eruptions or just general erosion, asteroids, whatever. Over time, it's going to collect. And as this collects, you get a new layer built on top. So we have this set up. So let's say these are just general plates going on. So to just start off with plate tectonics, generally plates, they're just kind of slowly moving, just a tiny bit each year. This creates different fault lines. Either they're pulling apart from each other, they are scraping against each other, or they are colliding with each other. That's kind of like the three main ways the plates are going to be interacting. So let's pull our sleeves up here. And whenever plates make contact, this is how you get mountains. So when the plates kind of hit, as you can see, look at these pieces of bread. They want to kind of fold up and push up to the sky, just like any tectonic plate. Now, eventually, one is just going to win. So what happens is as they push up, this one plate is going to subduct underneath the other, pushing it down into the Earth's mantle, represented by the cutting board here. So this will push up, and this puts pressure on this plate, forcing it up. So bam, you now have the creation of a mountain. Okay, so let's reset this. So generally speaking, we're going to be talking about two different style of plates. One is going to be an oceanic plate, and another one will be a continental plate. Oceanic plates are generally going to be pretty thin and they're newer, but much of their material is going to be a lot more dense. Contrary to continental plates, they are a lot older and have built up a lot of less dense material over time on top of each other. So most of the time when these two make contact, the oceanic plate will subduct and force the continental plate up, creating those mountains. Now, over time, these continental plates, since they're older, they slowly accumulate material. Whether, like I said before, that's just from volcanoes, generally from plates contact each other, this one, and this mountain eventually erodes away into the rest of the plate, dispersing that material across the land. So let's say this is the Pangaean continent. Boom, you have three large plates all connected to each other. Ancestral Rocky Mountains build up on this plate boundary. And then over time, as that erodes, it creates a new layer of sediment, which is this sandwich. You have the peanut butter, which will be just different loose gravel, and then you have the jelly, which could be like more organic material. And then here comes another significant amount of time. Those dunes form, creating more layers of that lion sandstone right on top. And then another layer comes in and forms. Another 50, 60 million years go by, and so on, and so on. So now we have this thick layer of less dense material just hanging out. And over time, as more material stacks onto it, the lower levels compress because of all of the weight on top of it. So we'll take this cutting board and compress our layers a little bit. And now we have a more compacted continental plate. So let's pull these out of the equation for now and put this in the center of view. So let's cut this in half and we will now see all of our compacted layers through the past billion years, or 5 minutes. So let's turn these things around and look at that. You have all of these rich layers. Like, so right here could be your rich sandstone layer from the desert dunes. This white layer could be a whole bunch of quartz from a mountain building event that eroded away. And then the next layer could be when this land sank back into the ocean and it's full of just dead crustaceans over millions of years gathering at the bottom of the ocean. So let's put these back together and I will show you how red rocks formed. So generally along most plate lines, everything is going to stay horizontal. But in this event, because of this very unique situation of the Rocky Mountains being like 600 miles within the continent, it creates a very unique way to see all of these layers. Instead of just drilling straight down, somehow they're all sticking up for us to see. Now, when the ancestral Rockies were built, there was a small mountain formation here. Like I said before, it never really got super tall, and most of the material that did appear above the surface were a lot of these layers that were been made and they were much younger, so they eroded a lot faster. Because this mountain building event wasn't super significant like the Rocky Mountains we have behind us. So that mountain building event did pull up some of the old billion-year-old granite way below the 300 million year old rocks that are surrounding us today. So when this had happened, that granite kind of pushed up a lot of those layers about 300 million years ago. So right in between all of these was a little piece of very old granite, and this created kind of like a dome. And then over the next 300 million years, yes, more layers would build on top of this. So then when that Pacific Oceanic plate came in and made contact with the North American continent, it slid under. But strangely enough, it kept going. It didn't just subduct right away like it would most of the time. It was able to push hundreds of miles past that fault line and push underneath the continental layer. It didn't really start subducting until enough material built up in front of it to push it down into the mantle. And so all that material that it collected underneath rose this general area up some. And now we're not going to get super deep into the multiple times this area rose. This video would be like 2 hours long. So we're just going to go simple. It pushed it in and it helped push this area up. Now the Rockies themselves had that little layer up. So it originally was pushed up, and then those first couple layers pushed up just like before, and they eroded away pretty quickly. So that would allow all of that granite, that old billion-year-old granite, to push up above these formations. Now to show you kind of what happened here, let's pull these pieces out and kind of take a couple layers of our sandwiches away to make this work. So we'll take these apart. So let's say these are all of our current layers. Now we'll grab this knife here and show you how these layers were pushed up and away at a 40-degree angle like we see them today. So as that granite was forced up, it forced all of those pre-existing layers apart, forcing them up at an angle as the Rockies grew. So we'll kind of go like that, and this bread slowly becomes the Rocky Mountains we know today, mainly comprising of, like I said, that really dense, hard granite that doesn't erode very fast. And now you can see we have this bread at a 45-degree angle, which is exactly what you see throughout this park. Even at Dakota Ridge or Dinosaur Ridge, you'll notice the angles everything's at. It's all at about a 45-degree angle. So as the mountains were forming and these layers came out and broke themselves free, you can see each formation as it happened. So you have billion-year-old Rocky Mountains. You have red rocks right here, which is that 300 million year old fountain formation. Then you then have the Lions Formation here, and then so on. Coming out to this final layer, which would be Dakota Ridge, which is about 140 million years old. So in just a small section, about what, a mile and a half, you can see 300 million years of Earth's geologic history. And so that is like a quick representation of, with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, on how the Rocky Mountains were formed. That is what makes this area so unique. From this very spot on top of Dakota Ridge, we are standing on a 140 million year old seabed, looking over oxidized iron sandstone formations built on the back of the ancestral Rocky Mountains that is now being overshadowed by the current Rocky Mountains, built by uplifted billion-year-old rock formations. What an awesome geological point of view we have right here, with Red Rocks in the background and Mount Morrison overlooking it at the top. It definitely gives you a really unique perspective on this area. Since these time capsules of ancient debris started resurfacing about 65 million years ago, they have had plenty of time exposed to the elements, slowly chipping away grain by grain into the formations we have behind us. Fortunately, this isn't the only place to witness such an impressive array of structures. They can be found all along the Front Range of the Rockies, from Garden of the Gods in Colorado Springs to around the Wyoming and Colorado border. Now we know why the amazing rock formations are here and how they were made. Let's get into how the amphitheater became a reality, entertaining multiple millions of guests over the years, exploring the history behind this magical venue. Long after this land was a shallow sea and dinosaurs thumped through this area, it became inhabited by early Native American cultures, and the earliest we currently know of are called the Folsom people. They would take up the majority of the central of the US, eventually splintering off into many of the kind of current tribes we know of to take over these areas today. The rise of the Ute tribe throughout the foothills and mountains of this entire region would provide our next consistent trails of evidence of regular visitors and people living around Red Rocks, known as Colorado's oldest inhabitants today. These massive sandstone formations became a focal point for the Ute tribes that called this area home. It became a center for ceremonies and rituals alike. It was significant enough that there is some evidence they built some forts not far from here to protect this place in the early 1800s when they began to skirmish with the Cheyenne all along the Front Range. Unfortunately, we don't really know the full extent of how it was used by them because much of their history was erased from this area when it started to be built up around the gold rush period. Most artifacts found here were either burned, destroyed, or just thrown away, even during the construction of the amphitheater, unfortunately. It really is a bummer to be missing thousands of years in native history from these grounds. I'm sure if even a fifth of these artifacts were held onto, we would have a much clearer picture of how they lived, how their ceremonies operated, and generally just how the tribe operated. It just would have been a really cool look into the Ute culture, which really is a bummer. It leaves a pretty significant gap in the rich history of this place. It isn't until the early 1800s that we have a better record of what really happened on these historic grounds. And really, it doesn't truly start until the late 1800s. So let's dive on in during the early portion of the century. Even during this time, the park remained an important ceremonial ground for the Ute, but one event would change everything. The Pikes Peak Gold Rush, starting at this very spot, at the confluence of Clear Creek and South Platte, just north of Denver, because traces of gold were found in this very area, leading ambitious gold prospectors into the Rockies to discover vast quantities of gold and silver hidden in the mountains, catapulting this state's, territories at the time's population starting in 1858. The remaining Utes in the area desperately tried to hold on to one last grasp of this sacred land, slowly being taken over by the gold miners starting in about 1858. Colorow, the local chief, used this area to camp and plan resistance towards the rapid change and encroachment into the Ute territory. And luckily enough, the rock formation called Colorow's Cave still exists today, right behind us here, which it sits on private land, so this is about as close as you can get to it. But that rock formation right here behind us, if you go around, there's an entrance and there's a big open interior in there called Colorow's Cave. This is where he spent a lot of his time trying to hold on to this land. Unfortunately, he and his tribe members were eventually forced out through treaties with the US officials. But don't worry, this definitely isn't where the story ends. Really, for him, it's just beginning here. So we may dive back into this passionate Ute chieftain once again later. It was not until 1872 that this land would see its first official owner. Marion Burt's didn't really accomplish much here during this time and didn't even provide its first namesake of the Garden of the Angels. This came 2 years earlier in 1870 after Judge Martin Van Buren Luther christened the name. So by 1878, Burt's would sell this land to a Pennsylvania railroadman named Leonard Eichholz. He would be the first to try and capitalize on the carved beauty of this land, slowly making it a recreational site for others to enjoy, sculpting the first road and trails into this landscape. John Brisbane Walker would become the third owner of this now park in 1905. Excited to lay the groundwork for a much more ambitious role for the park to play, quickly renaming it to Garden of the Titans. Well, that just sounds crazy. He planned on exploiting the area as entertainment, building a funicular up the side of Mount Morrison, and began hosting the famous Natural Amphitheater's first shows, with the first official performance held by Pietro Satriano and his 25-piece band. With the first significant performance, like the first kind of almost world-renowned name to come to the amphitheater, would be done in 1911 by an opera singer named Mary Garden, who praised this place for its perfect acoustics. But the success of this park was short-lived, and by the 1920s, Walker had sold some sections of the park and forfeited most of the land to John Ross, who would reach a deal with Denver to acquire the land in 1928. Denver would quickly start adding to this land, attempting to create an awe-inspiring park for the local populace. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, an unprecedented event would be just a small step away. It is just another normal day in October 1929. Everything is business as usual early in the morning. Everyone washing and prepping for the day, throwing on their work clothes and strutting out to the door. But this wasn't going to be just like any other normal day, because unlike the many weeks, months, or years before of just this very pleasant, nice, steady income coming in, supporting yourself and or your family, was all going to change by the end of the day. Because when the stock market opened up, the truth about this fragile economy came out, with massive stock sell-offs on Black Thursday and Black Tuesday would only mark the beginning of about a decade of economic hardship sweeping across the country. It would take a new president in 1932 to try and flush the country with starting fluid and kickstart its economic engine once again. He would call it the New Deal. FDR would put in place a series of new, expansive acts to try and put money into many industries across the nation. One of these would go to creating the CCC, or Civilian Conservation Corps. Its focus was on public lands and strove to expand public infrastructure for recreation, which Red Rocks just so recently became owned by Denver, so it qualified to become a great candidate for a much-needed boost. George Cranmer, head of Denver's Parks Department, would persuade the CCC to invest into the park and create it into the grand amphitheater we know of it today. One of Denver's best architects of the time would be bestowed the honor to design such an ambitious project to help gain the final approvals on gaining the funding. Burnham Hoyt would work tirelessly to perfect his design to every last detail, making sure all of the sightlines were perfected throughout the seating room so that anybody watching here can have a great view of the stage. Drawing up schematics on almost every plant lining the amphitheater, due to his extreme attention to detail and well thought out designs, the project was approved and work quickly began in 1935, starting off with removing over 50,000 cubic feet of dirt and rock, quickly putting the project behind and creeping over budget. The original plan for the amphitheater to be built was within 2 years. Well, since it quickly fell behind, it didn't exactly meet that date. It would finally finish 3 years later than expected in 1941, sitting at 6,450 feet above sea level, seating 9,525 people, built between two 300-million-year-old sandstone monoliths named Shiprock and Creation Rock that were developed by the ancestral Rocky Mountains, brought back to the surface by the current Rockies, weathered down to their current statures today, providing one of the only naturally occurring perfect acoustic amphitheaters in the world that has created endless memories for millions of attendees since its opening. Over the years, the amphitheater would see some changes and upgrades, including the sidewalls on the stage, because originally when it was built, it was just one big flat surface. They quickly kind of figured out there's a lot of wind that comes up here, and it would be pretty tough to run a show with all that wind. So it just kind of protects a lot of the stage and the stage equipment from that wind. Also over time, adding a stage cover and this Hall of Fame museum hidden below the top deck we are standing in right now, paying homage to all who have performed here and leaving room for future stars to leave their mark on this historic place. You never know. You could be the next one hanging your plaque on this very wall, becoming an honorable select few to perform and bring life to these grounds. From ocean invertebrates floating in a shallow sea to dinosaurs marching through, looking for their next meal, Ute Indians performing elaborate ceremonies, echoing their voices through these mystic rocks, and today's artists continuing this tradition, providing entertainment to almost 10,000 spectators, impressioning each and every one with stories to spread about the mighty Red Rock Amphitheater. And there you have it, Red Rock Amphitheater. Well, the story behind it, the geography and what led up to building it and what it is today. I just want to say thank you very much for watching and getting this far. These projects are a lot of fun to create, but generally, doing the research behind these is a lot of fun for me, and going out and filming it and then editing it, the whole process is pretty fun. So generally, if you want to see more, just subscribe to the channel and leave a like, and just comment below of any other stories you want me to venture into. I am welcome and open to some suggestions. All right, so that's about it. So I will see you on the next history venture, or hike, or town trip, or BMX short. Whatever content you enjoy watching, I'll see you there.